got about 30 seconds to make y'all feel it before y'all turn it off these days. That I might not even release this. But I be doing this shit for me. Help me get through. I feel like I give until I can't, but most don't recognize it till I ain't. Blood on them covers, she hoping paint. Sorry mama, but it ain't. This world took a toll on me, and everyone that say they love me always seem to follow me. The same one that call me great, treat me like I ain't shit. I read between the lines, it's written all over your eyes. I see the disappointment in the eyes of the ones who want me dead, but I ain't never been scared, I tried to get there. Sometimes I wonder if I survived or did I die on that ride to that hospital. Demons all around me, I am not mental. This game of life, it is not simple. Last time I was happy, I was popping pills.
Whoa, what's going on, everybody? It's your boy Cannon. We are doing a show today called the Turbulent 60s. I have the man of the hour, David Chandler, part of the Dream Team. And he has a special presentation for you guys tonight. First and foremost, if you supporting the channel, hit the like button, subscribe, leave a comment, give us some feedback. And I'm gonna turn it over to David Chandler. What's up, bro?
What's going on, Darian?
Not too much.
Thanks for co-opting me with this show. The reason why I wanted to do a show in the 60s was because we often talked to you, me, and other members of the Dream Team have talked on the phone of various times about the issues that are going on in our culture, the occult mainly, a lot of the nonsense that's going on in the times that we're living in. Mm-hmm. And everyone has pretty much been asking us, where did all this stuff come from? How did we get so bad? How did the culture get so bad? And it's the 60s, the 1960s. My mother coined it perfectly, the turbulent 60s. So I'm going to lay out some facts before we get too far into it. Number one, we have the major trends in the 1960s. We have spirituality and a New Age movement now, and the rise of Eastern philosophy and thought. Now, this is the result of the Beatles. The Beatles coming here in 1960 from England, and we have also on the Hair album, which came later, 9 years later, as a matter of fact, called it's a group called the Fifth Dimension, and their song was "The Age of Aquarius." Mm-hmm. I'll lay out the lyrics. When the moon hits the seventh house and Venus lines with Mars, and when love lines the planets and Jupiter lines the planets and love will steer the stars. And this is the dawning of the age of Aquarius. And it goes on. So that song pretty much means that man is going to, during the age of Aquarius, man is going to undergo a spiritual evolution. And this is what New Agers teach. And so this was thoroughly entrenched in the culture during the 60s. The Beatles was pretty much into the drugs, the hippie movement. We know a lot of you that are in your 50s and your 60s know a lot about the Haight-Ashbury district. Charles Manson, when he was released from prison in 1967, that's where he went. He was a hippie. He joined up with two people. He met two people, and that was the De Grimstons. They were the founders of the Process. He was a member of the Process Church. In 1964, we have the legislation of the War on Poverty by President Lyndon Baines Johnson. 1962, we have the publication, 1963, we have the publication of what is called The Feminine Mystique, and its author was Betty Friedan, who was the co-founder of the feminist movement, or the third wave of the feminist movement. In 1969, you have Gloria Steinem, who founded the organization known as NOW, which is an acronym for the National Organization for Women. She wrote that in the year 2000, we're going to teach our children to believe in in the power of human potential, not God. In 1966, the Hays Code was abolished. And let me explain to you what the Hays Code is. In 1934, you have a guy by the name of William H. Hayes, who was the founder of the Protestant Film Association, which established the Hays Code. The Hays Code was really etched in stone in the mid-30s, around 1934, 1935. And that pretty much meant that they oversaw a lot of the content within your movies, within your television shows, and things of that sort. Now, in the 50s, it lasted for about 40 years. I'm getting ahead of myself. It lasted about 40 years. And then around the 50s, it started to wane because a lot of your Hollywood movie stars, like Marilyn Manson and Jane Mansfield, became popular and they started complaining. And so around 1966, the Protestant Film Association just left Hollywood. And as a result of that, Hollywood became satanic. The Church of Satan took over, which was founded the same year. Anton LaVey, who was the founder of the Church of Satan, well, I would say the co-founder, because a guy by the name of Kenneth Anger, who was a film maker, was the co-founder of the Church of Satan as well. And he was very, very influential in the spread of Satanism within Hollywood. And Roman Polanski. Roman Polanski was also a filmmaker. He was married to Sharon Tate. And Sharon Tate was a Hollywood starlet, just like Marilyn Monroe, just like Jane Mansfield. Jane Mansfield was also a very popular actress during the 60s. And she was, at least they said, that she was the girlfriend of Anton LaVey. And she was in a terrible car accident. She was actually a member of the Church of Satan, and she ended up getting into a very, very nasty car accident, killed her. So in 1966, the Hays Code was abolished. Church of Satan took over Hollywood, and in 1968, a film was made, and it was called Rosemary's Baby. Very, very satanic.
That's what I used as the thumbnail for the YouTube, because I knew that you was going to go here. But continue.
Oh, okay. So the popularity, it was, of course, the Summer of Love took place in 1967, or what is called Woodstock Festival, and that spread over to Haight-Ashbury. Haight-Ashbury was an area or a district in San Francisco where you saw a lot of the drugs and the free love, free sex hippie movement. And at the apex of that was a guy by the name of Timothy Leary. Timothy Leary was also a follower of a guy by the name of Aleister Crowley. As a matter of fact, he stated in a show, he said, "I admire Aleister Crowley. I think that his work was very influential over 100 years ago." He said, "Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law under love." He said, "I am sorry that he isn't around to enjoy the fruits of what he started." So these people were Crowleyites, and this is during the 60s. Crowley, his views and his philosophy became entrenched in the culture, music. The Beatles, they were into the drug scene as well. They sung a song called "Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds." Now, if you're familiar with what is called esoteric language or witch language, or the you understand what that means. It's LSD, Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. They also did a video or a show, music, called Revolutionary Number 9. And if anybody understands what backmasking is, They believe that this song was done because the general consensus was Paul was dead. Paul McCartney was dead. He wasn't, but that was the general consensus at the time. And of course, everybody is familiar with Charles Manson, as I mentioned earlier. Charles Manson was instrumental in the deaths of Sharon Tate and the LaBiancas. Charles Manson knew the Beach Boys. As a matter of fact, Charles Manson stayed at one of the members of the Beach Boys mansion, and he claimed that the song that he wrote, "Cease to Exist," was changed to "Cease to Resist," and of course, Manson believed that he stole that song from him. So that pretty much caused him to go on to have his the members of his family, Tex Watson, Patricia Krenwinkel, and others to go out on a killing spree to kill Sharon Tate, who was the wife of Roman Polanski, who was out of the state, who was out of the country at the time, and the LaBiancas. But Manson was a member of a satanic cult or a satanic sect known as the Process Church of Final Judgment, which was established around, I think it was around 1963. And it was founded by two people, Robert and Mary de Grimston. And their belief system is very convoluted. They believe that Satan and Jesus Christ have worked together to bring about the last days. Of course, Satan is supposed to bring it into utopia, while Jesus Christ is supposed to be the individual to bring about judgment. And this is what Manson believed. Of course, Manson is dead. He died in prison. Let me go on here. A lot of the Satanic Bible was written and published in 1969. And so a lot of individuals, of course, the Satanic Bible was the hallmark of the Satanic Church, which was established 2 years before that. And of course, you've got a novel called Stranger in a Strange Land by Robert A. Heinlein, which explores alternative religious practices and philosophies. And this was written in 1960. This was published in 1961. The British invasion was around 1962, and that involved the popularity of bands like the Beatles and the Rolling Stones. The Rolling Stones and the Beatles were actually together. They weren't feuding with one another. The Rolling Stones became popular when Mick Jagger was in jail, and he claimed to have sold his soul to the devil, and that prompted him to write the song "Sympathy for the Devil." So psychedelic rock was born then, of course, with the Beatles' song "Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds," leading bands like the Grateful Dead, Jefferson Airplane, The Doors. The Doors was founded in 1969 by a guy by the name of Jim Morrison. Jim Morrison was in film school in Venice Beach, California, but he flunked out, and so he was wandering, or he's homeless. He was wandering around the beach in Venice Beach, and he sat on the roof of an abandoned building when he claimed to have seen the devil. And so he met the devil there, and he ended up becoming a musician, a rock star. And the name, The Doors, which was the name of his rock band, was inspired by a book that he read. It was called The Doors of Perception, published by a guy by the name of his name was Aldous Huxley. Of course, Motown and soul music started during the 60s, like Marvin Gaye, The Supremes, Stevie Wonder. Of course, Berry Gordy was using all of these guys. Marvin Gaye was the son of a preacher, a Baptist preacher, who was, a cross-dresser, and they got in. They weren't they didn't get along all that well. So he was murdered in 1984 by his own father. The Supremes, the Marvelettes, um, Stevie Wonder, and this went on. So we have folk music, like Bob Dylan. Bob Dylan said on 60 Minutes to Ed Bradley before he died that, well, Ed Bradley asked, well, why do you do it? And it's because of a pact that I made a long time ago. And he said, with the person on this earth, and he says, yeah, and the person that you can't see. So guys like him, Joan Baez, Pete Seeger, and the focus on social and political issues like Jimi Hendrix and War, the group War, and Edwin Starr. Edwin Starr wrote a song called War, What Is It Good For? Absolutely Nothing. And this was in response to the it was a response to, I believe it was the my God. But anyway, it was in response to the war that I think it was the Vietnam War, I believe. Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin, The Who. Janis Joplin, we know what happened to her. She died at the age of 27, same age as she died at the same age as Jim Morrison. And then you have Hollywood, the golden age of Hollywood ending, as I stated before, at the close of the Hays Code. That when the Hays Code was it was abolished, that ended Hollywood's golden age. We think of when you think of Hollywood's golden age, you're talking about the 20s and the 30s and the 40s. With Humphrey Bogart and Cary Grant and all these guys. And it was a shift from the studio system to modern independent filmmaking. Guys like Kenneth Anger and guys like Roman Polanski and individuals like that. So Psycho was pretty much popular with Anthony Perkins, who's dead. Lawrence Arabia, 1962, and then The Sound of Music, Bonnie and Clyde, Glorifying Violence, The Graduate, Space Odyssey, which is 2001, but in 2001, Space Odyssey in 1968, and Easy Rider in 1969. And a lot of these films were beginning to adopt a view that a lot of writers and film directors call, or people within the arts period know as the cathartic view of art. And the cathartic view of art basically means that it's not good enough to tell a story just for creative purposes. It's you tell a story to more or less push the envelope of morality. You're pushing an agenda. So Midnight Cowboy, which came out, I believe, in the 60s, was about homosexuality. The Wild Bunch was about violence. And you've got Rosemary's Baby, which was about Satanism. Lucifer Rising, which came out around the same year, which the film director was Kenneth Anger, and that was blatant Satanism. And then you have Invocation of My Demon Brother, which came out in 1971. That was also about demonism, Satanism. The Exorcist and The Exorcist 2. So all of those movies that I just talked about, like the Rosemary's Baby, that paved the way to all of the other blatantly occult movies that I just named that came out in the 70s and the 80s. That's pretty much it there. I think that the 60s are the reason why our culture is what it is today. The free love, free sex movement, the out of control back then, liberalism was beginning to become entrenched with our culture, and not only that, but political liberalism. You have I got a woman by the name of Madeleine O'Hare, who went to the Supreme Court in 1962 and argued that prayer should not be in the school system because, well, it was a violation of church and state, which had nothing to do with it. But that's pretty much the reason why prayer was taken out of the school, and it left us wide open for Satan to infiltrate our schools. And this is why our schools are in the condition that they're in. You look at Columbine in 1999, you look at Sandy Hook, you look at the Virginia Tech, all of these events because of what Madeleine O'Hare did. I can remember when I was in school, we had to stand up and sing a song, an old Negro spiritual, I guess, called "Lift Every Voice and Sing." Well, around 1985, that stopped. We didn't have to do that anymore. So because of what Madeleine O'Hare did, and she's dead, by the way. But this is the results of the '60s, the free sex, drugs movement that took place in the '60s gave rise to the crack epidemic in the '80s, the AIDS epidemic in the '80s. Back in the '60s, we only had about 4 sexually transmitted diseases. Now we have over 50, most of which are incurable, and some of which are, make you sterile. So this is the result of, and then the occult. The occult was spreading. Crowleyism. Aleister Crowley was against the family. He was against, family values, and so his plan was to destroy the family and start a sexual revolution. And that's exactly what he did. He became the father of the countercultural movement, which happened to be the 1960s. So this is why things are where they are now. Morality is in the sewer simply because of Crowleyism. He said to do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. And that became, in the 60s, do what you want to do. If it feels good, do it. The Isley Brothers had a song called "It's Your Thing, Do What You Want to Do." So that was strictly out of Crowley's playbook. Michael Jackson sung a song called, "Do What You Want to Do." There ain't no rules. It's up to you. So, and this was a song from his from off the album "On the Wall," I believe it was. It came out in 1979. So I'm gonna stop here and ask if anyone has any questions. Darian, do you have any questions?
Talk a little bit more about exactly what the countercultural movement is for me.
Well, the countercultural movement basically is a movement that goes against the social mores of that time. You have women believing that, they were beginning to rethink their views on relationships, marriage, their roles in the home. A lot more women were beginning to go to college, and a lot more men were becoming, they were leaving. They were leaving the homes, and even though there were some most of them were beginning to stay, but the culture was beginning to change. It was, of course, you call this a paradigm shift, and the countercultural movement is all about that. It's all about them separating from the cultural, or should I say the conservative values that had been entrenched in the culture for years. Well, years before the 60s anyway. But the 60s were beginning to. It was pretty much it was starting a shift. It was a spiritual shift, and and from then on, we started seeing a steady downgrade, in a sense, of morality, especially when it comes to the family. And not only that, but the countercultural movement had something to do with music. A lot of the music back in the 40s and the 50s was a little different from the music that was in the 60s. In the 60s, the music was becoming harder and less. It was less. What's the word I'm looking for? It was less geared to things that were conservative, I guess. If I don't know, I guess that's the term, the word that I'm looking for, I guess. But the music was a little bit more harder. It was geared towards drugs. It was geared towards living for self, living for the moment, I guess. Um, you know, illicit relationships. So it was all about revelry, partying, and things of that sort. And so the culture started to change. People
Right.
started wearing longer hair. They started looking more and more like the Beatles. When the Beatles came here during the night around 1960, they were clean. They were clean shaven. They were clean cut young men. But when it became popular, their image started to change. So that they were instrumental. Them and the Rolling Stones, they were instrumental in the counterculture.
Right.
And so was a guy by the name of Timothy Leary. Timothy Leary was also a very instrumental in the countercultural movement. And again, since Aleister Crowley was the founder or the father of the modern countercultural movement, what did Leary say? Leary said that he was a follower of Crowley. And so their idea was to change the culture with either their music or with their views on who Jesus Christ was, who God was, what religion was. And so all of that, all of those things started to change the way they lived and how they believed.
Okay. Well, what else can you tell me about the 60s that you feel like is pertinent?
Well, a lot of the films like Elmer Gantry, which came out in 1960, that was about a philandering evangelist who, that was the first shot at religion, and of course, the Hays Code was beginning to wane. As a matter of fact, it was almost non-existent at that point, and so they weren't really overseeing the content. So that pushed through, and that was pretty much it. That was pretty much what changed pretty much everything. And so now you have all of these other films that really started to become popular, and since the family was becoming a thing of the past, well, it wasn't becoming a thing of the past, but it was beginning to break down. We saw the family structure during the 60s begin to break down because of the music, and as a result of that, and you had more illicit relationships. The importance wasn't on building families. It was all about getting high and sleeping around, and those views became more and more entrenched, as I said before. And so the music was harder, and it was all about drugs and sex, like the Who and Led Zeppelin. Led Zeppelin came out in 1968, and so it was just a free fall of. And then the Doors came out in 1969, so that was, that pretty much sealed the casket, if as it were.
Okay. Um, and why do you feel like this topic was something that was that you felt like was necessary for for now?
Well, I just wanted to give people a clear answer as to how our world or our culture got to where it is now. Um, and, this is, I'd say, about 60 years in the making. Um, and we have to have a starting point because everything has a beginning. And so, if you really want to know how we can figure out or how to know, if we really want to know how things got as bad as they are now, all we got to do is go back to the 60s, because the 60s, people, at people that were working at higher levels of government, higher levels of whatever, whatever they were changing. um, they were changing laws, they were changing things, and we really didn't know. We really didn't know what was going on. And then the feminist movement, uh, that really became, um, a reason why the home, the family was in shambles, because, um, the churches weren't really doing too much, because the churches were too busy following after Martin Luther King. And so, since they were following after him, uh, they became too busy to preach against some of these things. Now, I'm not saying that there weren't any pastors and preachers back in those days that were preaching against any of these things, but their microphone was getting smaller, if that makes any sense.
I understand where you're coming from.
And so it wasn't a collusionary effort. So Satan was able to slither in that little crevice. And the Bible says only the small foxes spoil the vine. So if you have little small foxes that are able to slip in through those cracks and those crevices that we've left unattended, well, this is what happens. And so that's the case here with the 60s.
So when we discuss the 60s, if you could boil down this topic into, I guess, a phrase, what would that be?
A freeze. Um,
A phrase like the 60s were, like, if you could summarize.
okay. Well, I can summarize it this way. The 60s brought about, uh, a lot of it brought about the occult revival.
Okay. The
Uh,
60s brought about the occult or um, revival,
right.
and discuss what the occult revival is.
Well, the occult revival is simply this: a revival of, a lot of your Eastern religions, um, like, transcendental meditation, which became popular with the Beatles, because the Beatles went over there to India and, um, talked with one of the ascendant masters. So they came back over here and they made yoga and transcendental meditation, popular. They popularized it. They didn't.
Now, what makes those things? What makes transcendental meditation bad?
Well, you're yoking with spirits, just like with yoga. The Greek, the word yoga means to yoke. So you're yoking with spirits, and they can latch on to you spiritually, and is a that's a direct way to demon possession.
Oh wow! Continue what you were saying about the Beatles bringing these practices over.
Well, yeah, they just brought them over here, and they popularized them, and so that's why other rock groups started singing about, um, you know, a lot of these, Eastern philosophical themes, like George Harrison My Sweet Lord in 1971. And The Doors talking about, well, the name Doors is pretty self-explanatory. Um, and then, you know, the Beatles talking about singing a song called Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. We all know that's LSD. They believe that, taking, well, by the way, taking drugs like that, during those days, they believe that they can enter the spirit world, and of course, that's exactly what they were doing. Timothy Leary was all about taking mescaline and all of these other mind bending drugs because they wanted to um, tap into the spirit world. But all they were doing is tapping into demonic energy. The Bible talks about um, sorcery in the book of Galatians. The Greek word there is pharmakeia, which we get the word drugs or pharmacy from. Um, in the book of Revelation, they talk about, and they will not repent of their sorceries, which drug use. And it's interesting how the Bible uses this Greek word pharmakeia or pharmakos, the Greek word for pharmacy, that's where we get our word pharmacy from, because it's it lines you up with it kind of gives you an opportunity to tap into the demonic or the spirit world. And this is what a lot of these musicians do. This is what a lot of these musicians back in the 60s did. A lot of them got high.
Right.
Sly and the Family Stone sung a song called "Thank You for Letting Me Be Myself." Do you not know that they were all high when they did that song?
Yeah, that's deep. So you feel like some of the biggest issues from the 60s was the amount of drug use and the occult practices that they brought in.
Well, yeah, it really, think of it, 20 years from the 60s with the 80s, the drugs and the sexual revolution brought what? It brought, and of course, the feminist movement. All of those things brought broken homes and, the spread of AIDS, HIV, and then you've got the spread of drugs, crack cocaine. Uh, but, if you look at some of the movements that were taking place during the 60s, uh, you know, especially, I'm pretty sure you've heard of what was his name? Um, Harvey Milk and Harry Hay. These two were politicians, and they were also into music. And I think they were pretty popular. I'm pretty sure they were probably in the 70s, if I'm not mistaken. But they started the whole gay revolution, the gay movement, or the homosexual revolution, and that helped the spread of HIV/AIDS during the 80s.
Oh wow. You telling me something new? I didn't know that.
Well, it started in San Francisco. All of these things started in the Haight-Ashbury district of San Francisco. That's where, of course, in the beginning of my treatise, Charles Manson, when he got released from prison in '67. And then, of course, the feminist movement didn't do us any good, didn't do us any favors. And so that led to the push for, because, of course, Crowley wanted a sexual revolution. And so that's where a lot of these things come from. And so in the 80s, we had AIDS, we had drugs, we had all of these problems, all these social problems, especially in our community, but in the world at large, the culture at large, broken homes, dysfunctional families, because of what we saw in the 60s.
I understand where you're coming from. I understand exactly where you're coming from. So you've talked about um, the Beatles bringing over esoteric, or what was it, Eastern philosophy and Eastern teachings. Can you name a few leaders of the Eastern teachings that were prevalent in America at that time?
Let me see here. Well, you have. Let me see. Give me 1 second. Um,
Doing a little research on the fly.
yeah, it wasn't in my notes, so I should have put philosophy.
I know you mentioned Aleister Crowley was popular, even though he had already been long gone, right?
Right. Well, Crowley was the main one, but you have Aldous Huxley,
Okay.
a lot of Eastern philosophical beliefs, and you of course you've got a guy by the name of what's his name? Guy that founded Scientology, L. Ron Hubbard. Now, L. Ron Hubbard was popular because he was also a Crowleyite. And Scientology basically is kind of like a mixture of Satanism and some Eastern philosophical beliefs. You have Aldous Huxley, who wrote the Perennial Philosophy in 1945. Well, he published it in 1945, and he believed that everything, all religions are pretty much the same.
Oh wow.
All religions are pretty much the same, except for maybe a few peripheral differences. But all religions are the same. That's the perennial philosophy. That's the New Age. That's what New Agers teach. And so, since all religions are the same, then all religions lead to the same path. That's um, all religions lead to the same path. Everything comes around to the same spot. So this is what he believed. And the Doors founder, his name is Jim Morrison, as I stated. He wrote. Well, he was an admirer of Jim Morrison. Elvis Presley was an admirer of Helena Blavatsky. As a matter of fact, Elvis Presley, who was very, very popular during the 60s, was, he had her book at the end of his life. He had her book called The Secret Doctrine. And because of that, he believed that he had psychic powers. He believed that he had certain abilities. He could control the weather and all of that other stuff. So,
And this is Elvis Presley.
yeah, Elvis Presley.
Wow, that's deep. Continue.
Yeah, I was trying to think because there were several individuals that followed after, because if you got to understand something with people like these, with people like this, they they kind of they steal from one another. They steal from one another, and they may change certain things around, but what they do is they glean from one another's teachings and they use it for their own purposes, and or they'll use it and then they'll change a few things around here and there to kind of make it seem like it's their idea. But when you
Right.
read it closely, like Rudolf Steiner, his belief, anthroposophy, was similar to Helena Blavatsky's belief in theosophy, meaning that man can see into the metaphysical using his five senses.
Right.
But all of these guys, all these rock stars, they admired Crowley. All of the, they Elvis Presley was probably the only one that didn't. Elvis Presley, as I said before, admired Helena Blavatsky. Of course, Hitler, as we have chronicled in the past, admired Helena Blavatsky, had her book, and she was the mother of New Age thought. And then that after she died, then Henry Olcott was leading the Theosophical Society, and then it was Annie Besant, and then it was Alice Bailey. And Alice Bailey branched off and started Lucis Trust. And this was all during the 40s.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the 30s and the 40s. So, and I'm pretty sure it fell in and out of hands, different hands. And so, Aldous Huxley and his brother Julian, they got a hold of it, and they came up with their own ideas. The perennial philosophy, same thing, it's the same thing.
So it's the same. It's basically the same. You feel like it's the same teachings repackaged over and over again.
Yeah, I mean, that's with every cult. Every cult and every false doctrine. It has an origin, but it, as I said before, they fall in and out of different hands. So it'll change. It's never consistent. The doctrine will change, but when all it takes is a discerning eye, and you're saying, oh, wow, this is straight out of the Theosophical Society. Oh, this is straight out of Aleister Crowley's teachings. This is straight out of, Blavatsky and Besant. Besant learned from Blavatsky. So did Alice Bailey, learned from Blavatsky. Henry Olcott was under Blavatsky, founded the Theosophical Society. So, again, as the Bible says, nothing is new under the sun.
Right. So, J-Fact says, is it due to them all having a similar core principle?
Yeah. That's exactly right. They all had the same core belief system, and it's the worship of Luciferianism. Luciferianism is not necessarily, well, it is Satanism, but it's Satanism with a twist. They believe that that Satan is the liberator for mankind. Remember what the serpent said to Eve, ye shall not surely die. Your eyes shall be opened, and ye shall be as gods, knowing good from evil. So what was the serpent offering Eve? Well, the serpent was offering Eve knowledge. Knowledge. The same knowledge that God didn't want them to have anything to do with. They didn't want them to know anything about good and evil. They wanted them to be innocent. That's how they were created. They were created innocent, Adam and Eve. Well, Adam was. Adam was created innocent. Well, both of them were. And so when the serpent came along, he offered them esoteric knowledge. And this is what they teach. This is what all of them, Helena Blavatsky said in her book, I think it was The Secret Doctrine, I am the snake that giveth knowledge. I mean, hello. It's just straight. It's again, it's all of it is the same.
Yeah, that's deep.
So go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was just saying that was deep, for her to make that statement in her material.
Yeah, it's crazy how all of these, if you look at all of these different religions, especially going all the way back into the 60s or even further than that, you'll recognize or you'll realize that they didn't teach anything any new than the other guy did or anything different than the other guy did. It's all the same. God's word never changes. You don't read the word. You don't, even though we have 50,000 different Bible versions, God's word is still the same. You don't read the Bible one day and then pick it up the next day and find something different. You don't. It's the same. Jesus is the same yesterday, today, and forever. He does not change, and that's one of his, uh, uh, his non-communicable attributes. He's immutable. But Satan is changing all the time because he wants to keep man confused, because he is the father of confusion.
Right.
So, but yeah, the 60s were a lot of it was a lot of stuff going on during the 60s, a lot of stuff, and you got to go back if you want to know why things are the way. Like, again, and I don't want to sound like a broken record, but if you want to know why things are the way that they are, you got to go back to the 60s. You want to know why the homes, the family, especially the black family. I gotta really hit home with this. When the black family fractured broke because when the feminist movement came on the scene, we didn't have anything to do with it. We didn't have anything to do with it. It's just a bunch of white folks mad at each other. The white women were mad at white men because white men didn't allow them to make as much money as they did. So they got mad and they stood in front of college campuses and whatnot. Not only were they protesting the war, but they were protesting, equality. They were protesting equality. And so that's how the feminist movement got restarted. It got revamped, because that's the third wave. The first wave was during the 1920s with Susan B. Anthony.
Okay, so Susan B. Anthony was the first wave. And why do you think that was done?
Well, it was to change the culture, and it was a some conspiratorial historical individuals will turn around and say that this was a communist plot, but I believe it was to some degree, but I believe that it was done to destroy the family. Like Betty Friedan and Gloria Steinem, they were puppets used by the shadow government to destroy the family, to break down the family, if you can destabilize the family, then you can destabilize the community. And if you can destabilize the community, then you can destabilize the culture. And that's exactly what they did with feminism.
And then, so once people bought into, ideologies like feminism, that's what started us on this journey as a nation.
Yeah, it started us down this downward spiral. And it wasn't just them. It wasn't just feminism. It was just Black liberation theology got popular by James Cone. He wrote a book, and it was published in, I think it was 1969. And he kind of popularized the idea of Black liberation theology. And when the Black church was going around following after King, that's kind of how it started. It kind of got started, but it kind of got started with him. But I think King and the members of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference and all of these others like Jesse Jackson and Al Sharpton, they kind of got it started in a sense.
Yeah.
And it pushed the Black church further away from God, I believe. Now, I'm going to reiterate this for all of those that are listening and for all of those that are in the chat. I'm not saying all Black churches fell victim to King and his principles. I'm not saying this. What I am saying is that the church as a whole, or the church disproportionately, did. and we've been suffering from it ever since.
I understand where you're coming from. Now we are fastly approaching the hour mark. Do you want to summarize and give some last words?
Yeah, the 1960s were turbulent. It brought about occultic beliefs, or it brought about a revival of occultic beliefs. Um, Let me go back to my notes here. It brought about a rise of Eastern spirituality. It brought an increased interest in Hinduism and Buddhism, popularity of transcendental meditation, and the Beatles made that popular, and now people are doing. Now it's a thing. The psychedelic culture, the use of psychedelics like LSD and mescaline and PCP, that was made popular by a guy by the name of Timothy Leary. And of course, was promoted because of the push for spiritual, or the search for spiritual enlightenment. Tune in, turn on, tune in, and drop out. That was his phrase. The emerging of the New Age movement, the blending of Western and Eastern spiritual practices. This was done primarily through the music, and I mentioned the Fifth Dimension group on the Hair album, Age of Aquarius, and other songs. Occultic and related films, films with occultic themes like Rosemary's Baby, Lucifer Rising, things of that sort, that increased fascination with witchcraft, mysticism, and esoteric knowledge, and the popularity of figures like Anton LaVey, who was the founder of the Church of Satan. I also mentioned that the Hays Code was abolished in 1966, and of course, the Woodstock Festival, 1969, and the founding of the third wave of the feminist movement, which took place in 1968 with the establishment of the organization known as NOW.
Okay. I definitely appreciate you for dropping some knowledge on the channel. Shout outs to DMG, shout outs to JFax, shout outs to the GT, shout outs to the Super Team, Leandre, Byron, BK, Nobody, Trey, Thomas, Jerome. Just shout out to everybody, part of Paradigm Shift, who have been around the Craig and Craig Law Firm. We know that there is a debate coming up between, I want to say is Benu. I think Benu is about to debate. I know that Jamela Takori need to get a rescheduling, a rain date, but I appreciate everybody for listening and locking in with my man David Chandler, and we're gonna sign out.
Peace.